Kitsune. The Kitsune is one of the most powerful and layered beings in all of Japanese mythology, a fox spirit that grows more dangerous with every century it survives. For each 100 years of life, it earns a new tail, and a Kitsune with 9 tails has lived long enough to be considered a celestial being, rivaling the gods themselves in wisdom and power. They are shapeshifters, most commonly taking the form of beautiful women, and their disguises are nearly flawless. Nearly. Dogs can always sense them, and a kitsune's true reflection will betray it, regardless of how convincing the illusion. In Shinto tradition, the white and golden-furred kitsune serve as divine messengers of Inari, the god of rice and prosperity, and their stone statues still guard shrines across Japan today. The darker-furred ones, however, are tricksters and manipulators, seducing, deceiving, and ruining lives purely because they can. One creature, 2 completely opposite natures, and 9 tails that tell you exactly how much trouble you're in. Tanuki. Where the kitsune is cunning and dangerous, the tanuki is the bare-bellied, sake-drunk, perpetually grinning clown of Japanese folklore. A raccoon dog spirit associated with good fortune and mischief, the tanuki also shapeshifts, but its method reveals everything about its personality. It places a single leaf on its head and transforms. That is the full extent of its magical sophistication. The illusions work, mostly, until the tanuki falls asleep or drinks too much, at which point the disguise collapses entirely. Ceramic tanuki statues outside restaurants and sake shops across Japan depict it with a wide-brimmed hat, a sake bottle, and a comically oversized belly, representing its 8 traditional symbols of good luck. It is not threatening. It is not malevolent. It is simply round, cheerful, and occasionally drunk, which is exactly why people love it. Tengu. The Tengu are mountain beings who began their existence as straightforward demons and slowly earned enough respect to become something closer to divine. There are 2 distinct forms, the Karasu Tengu, an older and more monstrous crow-headed creature with broad black wings, and the Dai Tengu, a humanoid figure with a long nose, mountain priest robes, and the bearing of something that has seen centuries pass. The Dai Tengu are associated with swordsmanship and martial discipline, and according to legend, the warrior Minamoto no Yoshitsune was trained in combat by Tengu on Mount Kurama near Kyoto as a child. They carry a Hauchiwa fan capable of summoning great winds and are particularly hostile toward arrogance, especially among Buddhist monks who abuse their religious authority. They are not evil. They are simply older and sharper than anything you have encountered, and they have no patience for pretenders. Kappa. The Kappa is a reptilian humanoid that lives in rivers and lakes and has been killing people in Japan for centuries, which makes the fact that it is also polite somewhat unsettling. It has green scaly skin, a turtle shell on its back, webbed hands, and a shallow dish of water on the top of its head. That dish is the source of its power, and if it ever spills, the Kappa is immediately incapacitated. This is why bowing to a Kappa works as a survival strategy. It will bow back out of courtesy. The water tips, and it loses its strength. Its preferred prey is humans and horses, which it drags underwater to feed on their shirikodama, a mythical soul ball said to reside inside the body. The countermeasure most families used was simpler. Write your family name on a cucumber and throw it in the river. Even today, warning signs near certain rural waterways in Japan reference the Kappa. Ningo. Western mermaids are beautiful, melancholy, and romantic. The Japanese Ningo is a fish-bodied creature with a human face, and, in many descriptions, features closer to a monkey than a woman, and it brings disaster to anyone who encounters it. Fishermen who accidentally caught a Ningo would throw it back immediately, rather than risk the storms and catastrophes that followed a sighting. The flesh of the Ningo, however, grants near immortality, and according to the legend of Yaobikuni, a young woman who accidentally ate Ningo flesh lived for approximately 800 years, wandering Japan as an ageless nun before finally dying at a shrine in Wakasa province. She did not age. She simply could not stop living. The Ningyo's cry is described as hauntingly beautiful, which in Japanese folklore is almost always a warning. Umi-bozu. The Umi-bozu appears on calm water, which is the detail that makes it truly frightening. Sailors feared storms, but the Umi-bozu came when the sea was flat and still, rising from the water as an enormous black mass with two pale glowing eyes and no other discernible features. No mouth, no limbs, just a silhouette large enough to fill the horizon, looming over the hull of a ship before capsizing it. Accounts describe it as smooth and featureless, like a shaved monk's head, which is how it got its name. Umi-bozu, sea Buddhist monk. According to folk tradition, the only way to survive an encounter was to offer it a barrel with no bottom, which it would attempt to fill with seawater forever, giving you just enough time to flee. Whether that ever worked for anyone is another question entirely. Isanade. The Isanade does not announce itself. There is no rising shape, no glowing eyes, no warning sound. One moment a fisherman is on the water, and the next he is gone, dragged under by a single sweep of an enormous hook-covered tail belonging to a shark-like creature from the waters around Kyushu. The Isanade's tail bristles with backward-facing hooks, and one swipe across the hull of a boat or the deck where a man is standing is enough to drag him into the sea without a struggle. Entire disappearances near the coastline were attributed to it. It leaves nothing behind. No wreckage, no blood, no evidence of anything except absence. Fishing communities along Kyushu's coast developed elaborate sea appeasement rituals, in part because of creatures like this, the ones you never see coming. Yamata no Orochi. Yamata no Orochi is recorded in the Kojiki, Japan's oldest written chronicle dated to 712 AD, and its scale is genuinely difficult to process. 8 heads, 8 tails, a body so vast it spans 8 valleys and 8 hills simultaneously, with a belly permanently stained red from the blood of its victims. Each year, it demanded a virgin sacrifice from the family of the earthly deity Ashinazuchi, and by the time the storm god Susanoo arrived, it had already consumed 7 of their 8 daughters. Susanoo's solution was elegant. He had 8 vats of sake prepared, 1 for each head, and waited while all 8 of the serpent's heads drank themselves into unconsciousness. He then cut through every neck. Inside one of the tails, he found Kusanagi no Tsurugi, a sword so sacred it became one of Japan's 3 imperial treasures, and a physical version is still housed today at Atsuta Shrine in Nagoya. Ryujin. Beneath the sea, according to Shinto tradition, sits Ryugu-jo, a palace built from coral and crystal, ruled by Ryujin, the dragon king of the ocean. He is enormous in his true form, a sea dragon whose presence commands every creature in the water, and he controls the tides using 2 magical jewels. The kanju, which pulls the tide back, and the manju, which drives it forward. He is also, according to the Kojiki, an ancestor of the Japanese imperial line, as his daughter Toyotama Haim married the hunter Huri, and their lineage eventually produced Emperor Jimmu, the legendary first emperor of Japan. The folktale of Urashima Taro elaborates on Ryugu-jo's most disorienting property. Time inside the palace moves at a different rate. The fisherman Urashima spends what feels like days there and returns to find 300 years have passed on land. Baku. The Baku eats nightmares. It arrived in Japan from China, believed to have entered Japanese folklore during the Muromachi period between 1336 and 1573, and its original form was a chimeric patchwork animal built from borrowed pieces, an elephant's trunk, a tiger's paws, an ox's tail, and the eyes of a rhinoceros. Waking from a bad dream and saying, "Devour my dream," 3 times was enough to summon it, and it would consume the nightmare entirely, leaving peaceful sleep behind. The danger was overuse. A Baku that ran out of nightmares would not simply leave. It would consume whatever remained, including hopes, ambitions, and desires, hollowing a person out until nothing was left. In modern Japanese, the word for tapir is also Baku, because the tapir's long snout reminded people of the dream-eating creature, and the two images have since merged almost completely. Oni. The Oni are enormous horned demons, and one of the most recognizable figures in all of Japanese religion and folklore, appearing in Shinto, Buddhism, and folk tradition simultaneously across more than 1,000 years of culture. Their skin is most commonly red or blue. They carry a kanabo, a spiked iron club, and in Buddhist cosmology, they serve as torturers in Jigoku, the realm of hell, where they punish sinners with methodical and unapologetic brutality. Every year on February 3rd, during the Setsubun Festival, people across Japan throw roasted soybeans at representations of Oni while shouting, "Oni wa soto, fuku wa uchi." Demons out, luck in. Children do this in schools. Adults do it at home. The Oni, for all their terrifying iconography, are also the creatures that get beans thrown at them by 7-year-olds once a year, and somehow that makes them more Japanese than almost anything else on this list. Shuten Doji. Shuten Doji, whose name means sake-drinking youth, was described as supernaturally beautiful despite being the most feared Oni in Japanese legend, a demon lord who lived on Mount Oi near Kyoto during the Heian period, kidnapping aristocrats and consuming their flesh and blood at nightly sake banquets deep in his mountain fortress. The hero Minamoto no Yorimitsu, known as Raiko, ended him, but not through open combat. Raiko and his 4 retainers disguised themselves as traveling monks, infiltrated the mountain, and offered Shuten Doji poisoned sake, a gift he accepted because hospitality demanded it. Even after Raiko decapitated him, the severed head continued to attack, biting down at the hero's helmet before finally going still. The full story is preserved in illustrated scrolls called the Shuten Doji Emaki, and the mountain Oyama is a real place in Kyoto Prefecture that still carries his name in local memory. Gashadokuro. The Gashadokuro does not come from one death. It forms from many. From the accumulated bones and collective grudge of soldiers and civilians who starved to death and were never given a proper burial, their resentment hardening over time into something 15 times the height of a human, constructed from hundreds of skulls and femurs fused together into a single enormous skeleton with green fire burning in every eye socket. It roams at night in complete silence except for a ringing sound, like a bell heard from somewhere just behind your skull. Hearing that ringing is the warning. By the time you see the Gashadokuro, you are already close enough to be grabbed, decapitated, and drained of blood in a single motion. A momentary satisfaction for a hunger that can never actually be filled because it is not made of one stomach, but of thousands of forgotten dead. Yuki-onna. The Yuki-onna appears during blizzards as a tall, impossibly pale woman with her lips the only color in an entirely white world. Blue-purple against skin like fresh snow, hair loose, floating just above the surface without leaving footprints. In some regional traditions, she is purely lethal, freezing travelers solid with a single breath. In others, she is more ambiguous. The version recorded by Lafcadio Hearn in his 1904 collection quite tells of a young woodcutter named Minokichi who survives an encounter only because the Yuki-onna spares him, on the condition that he never speaks of her. He agrees. Years pass. He marries a woman of unusual beauty, and one winter night he tells his wife the story, at which point she reveals herself as the Yuki-onna, and that she is leaving him alive only for the sake of their children. The regional versions across Tohoku and Nagano vary significantly. The cold does not. Kuchisake-onna. In 1979, children across multiple Japanese prefectures were being escorted home from school in groups because of reported sightings of a woman in a surgical mask. The Kuchisake-onna, the slit-mouthed woman, approaches alone at night, mask covering the lower half of her face, and asks one question: Am I beautiful? Say yes, and she removes the mask to reveal a mouth cut from ear to ear, and asks again. Say no, and she kills you. Say yes the second time, and she cuts your mouth to match hers. The folk solutions are specific. Answer that she is average, give her candy, or ask her a confusing question to create enough of a delay to run. The 1979 panic is one of Japan's most documented cases of urban legend mass hysteria. The legend itself traces back to a Heian-era story of a woman mutilated by a jealous husband, though the two versions are separated by nearly 1,000 years of distance. Jorogumo. The Jorogumo is a spider that, after living for 400 years, gains the ability to transform into a beautiful woman. It uses this ability for exactly one purpose. It lures men, plays a biwa, a traditional Japanese lute, to mask the sound of its spider children feeding, and then wraps its prey in silk and devours them. The name translates depending on which kanji you read. Binding bride or whore spider, and both meanings were intentional. Joran Falls in Izu, Shizuoka, is the most famous location associated with the Jorogumo, a real waterfall where legends of woodcutters being dragged to their deaths by an unseen silk thread have persisted for centuries. A log once reportedly became stuck there and could not be dislodged no matter how many men pulled, until it simply disappeared into the water. No one went back for it. Ittan-momen. The Ittan-momen is a strip of white cotton fabric, roughly 10 meters long, that has been alive for 100 years and resents it. It belongs to the Tsuchigumo tradition, the belief that objects cared for or simply left alone long enough will eventually gain a soul, and that soul will almost always be inconvenient for the living. The Ittan-momen comes out at night, billows silently through the dark, and wraps itself around the face and neck of anyone unfortunate enough to be walking alone, suffocating them. It has no face, no eyes, no voice. It is simply fabric. The Tsuchigumo tradition is documented in Heian-era illustrated scrolls including the Tsuchigumo Zoshi, and it reflects a deeply Japanese attitude toward objects, that neglect is its own kind of insult, and that everything, given enough time, will remember how it was treated. Nurikabe. The Nurikabe is an invisible wall, not metaphorically. It is a spirit that manifests as a literal barrier across a road or mountain path at night, stopping travelers cold with no explanation and no way around it. Walking around it results in the wall reappearing. Backing up and trying a different route results in the wall reappearing. It will stand there until dawn, which in dense fog on a mountain pass is its own form of horror. According to folk tradition from Kyushu, the only countermeasure is to tap the very bottom of the wall with a stick. Not the middle, not the top, specifically the bottom, and it will dissipate. Whether this instruction was genuinely believed, or was simply what desperate people told each other in the dark, is an open question. The Nurikabe was later popularized widely through Shigeru Mizuki's manga, Gegege no Kitaro, but the Kyushu oral tradition predates it. Raijin. Raijin is the Shinto god of thunder and lightning, and looks exactly like the sound a thunderclap makes if you turned it into a person. He is depicted as a fierce, Oni-like figure with wild hair and an expression caught between fury and ecstasy, surrounded by a halo of taiko drums which he strikes to produce thunder. Each beat a different drum, each drum a different tone, the whole sky his instrument. He almost always appears alongside Fujin, the wind god, and the paired statues of Raijin and Fujin flank the gates of major temples across Japan, including Sensoji in Asakusa, Tokyo. Folk tradition warns parents to tell their children to hide their belly buttons during storms, because Raijin is said to eat them, which is terrifying, practical as a way to keep children indoors, and has been functioning as parental advice for centuries. His storms, despite everything, were also believed to fertilize the rice fields. Fujin. Fujin carries every wind in the world in a single enormous bag slung over his shoulder, and when he opens it, the air moves. He is one of the oldest figures in the Kojiki, present at the very beginning when the primordial world was nothing but formless mist, and according to tradition, it was Fujin who scattered that mist to reveal the sky and the land for the first time. His appearance mirrors Raijin's intensity. Wild-haired, mid-motion, expression uncontainable, and like Ryujin, he is almost always depicted in motion, never still, the bag billowing behind him as though he cannot stop. The paired statues of Fujin and Ryujin at Sanjusan Gendo Temple in Kyoto are among the oldest surviving deity depictions in all of Japanese art, and standing in front of them, you understand immediately why ancient people looked at a storm and decided two beings, this untamed, must be responsible for it. Izanami. Izanami created Japan and then died doing it, and what came after is one of the most haunting myths in Shinto tradition. She and her husband, Izanagi, stirred the primordial ocean with a jeweled spear until land rose from it, the island of Onogoro, the first solid ground. Together, they created the Japanese islands and many of the gods, but when she gave birth to the fire deity Kagutsuchi, his flames burned her from the inside out, and she died. Izanagi traveled to Yomi, the underworld, to bring her back, and she told him not to look at her. But he lit a torch and saw her body rotting, writhing with maggots. Her divine form collapsed into something barely recognizable. She chased him out of Yomi in fury, and as he sealed the entrance with a great boulder, she swore to kill 1,000 of his people every day. According to the Kojiki, he replied that then 1,500 would be born. That exchange is described as the origin of death and birth existing simultaneously in the world. Susanoo. Susanoo, god of storms and the sea and one of the three noble children of Izanagi, was exiled from heaven for weeping. His grief was so total and so violent that his tears caused mountains to crumble and seas to dry, and his father cast him out. Before leaving, he visited his sister Amaterasu, the sun goddess, and the confrontation between them was destructive enough to drive her into hiding inside a cave sealed by a divine boulder, plunging the entire world into darkness. On Earth, he redeemed himself by killing Yamata no Orochi, marrying Kushinada Hime, the daughter he saved from the serpent's yearly tribute, and, according to tradition, composing the first waka poem in Japanese history to celebrate their union. He is one of the most fully drawn figures in the Kojiki, destructive, grief-stricken, capable of genuine heroism, and personally responsible for both the worst and one of the best things that happen in the early mythological world. Amaterasu. Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun and the most important deity in the Shinto pantheon, was born when Izanagi washed his left eye after fleeing the underworld. Her emergence was so radiant, it illuminated all of heaven at once. The world has needed her light ever since, which became catastrophically clear when she sealed herself inside the Ama no Iwato, a cave blocked by a divine boulder, after her brother Susanoo's rampage left heaven in ruins. With the sun gone, darkness covered everything, and evil spirits ran unchecked across the land. The other gods gathered outside the cave, and the goddess Ami no Uzume began a wild, comedic dance that made every deity watching dissolve into laughter so loud and uncontrollable that Amaterasu opened the door just enough to see what could possibly be funny at the end of the world, and the gods dragged her back out. The Imperial House of Japan claims direct descent from her, and she is still enshrined at the Grand Shrine of Ise, the most sacred site in Shinto, where she has been worshipped continuously for over 1,000 years. Tsuchigumo. The Tsuchigumo, or earth spider, is ancient enough to appear in both the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, Japan's two oldest chronicles, where the term was used in two ways simultaneously. As a name for a monstrous giant spider that dragged people underground, and as a political label applied to indigenous clans who resisted imperial rule. The implication being that defiant people and monsters were the same category. The most famous monster version is preserved in the Tsuchigumo Zoshi, an illustrated scroll from the Kamakura period, in which the hero Raiko, the same warrior who would later destroy Shuten Doji, falls gravely ill from a mysterious samurai who turns out to be the Tsuchigumo in disguise. He wounds it, follows the blood trail to its cave, and finds its body filled with the skulls of thousands of previous victims. The political use of the name is arguably more disturbing than the creature itself. Shinigami. The Shinigami, Japan's god of death, arrived relatively late in Japanese folklore, likely during the Edo period between 1603 and 1868, possibly influenced by Buddhist death deities and through gradual cultural contact with Western ideas of the Grim Reaper. Unlike its Western counterpart, the early Shinigami in Japanese tradition was not necessarily malevolent, more like a presence at the edge of things, standing silently at cliff faces or beside the seriously ill, neither threatening nor comforting, simply there. In the Rakugo comedic storytelling tradition, a famous tale describes a desperate man who gains the ability to see Shinigami standing beside the sick. If the Shinigami stands at the patient's head, they will die. At the feet, they will recover. And he uses this knowledge to become a celebrated healer, until the night he tries to cheat death on his own behalf. In 2003, Death Note brought the Shinigami to a global audience and made it one of the most recognized supernatural figures in the world. It started as a whisper at the edge of a cliff. It became an icon. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.